Okay. Can you see my screen now?
I can, yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to our webinar today. We have Karthik on board and he'll be presenting on snakes and ladders. I will leave the details for him to get into. Before we do that, just a little bit of housekeeping about the IIBA. This is the IIBA UK chapter. It's run by BAs, four BAs, and um, we have members that are affiliated with the UK chapter of over 1,400 plus members and increasing by the day. We have five main branches: Scotland, North, Southwest, Wales, Midlands, and London. 40% of IIBA UK chapter members are corporate members from 25 organizations, and all this is possible due to a dedicated team of 50 volunteers and counting. Um, we usually partner with the IRM, BA Live, and BA Excellence partner when they have conferences or they have events. We have virtual offerings, webinars like this, mentoring schemes, weekly brown bag sessions, BA book club, and book authors. We have, a rich community where we organize, seminars, workshops, socials, volunteers, community events, where we make sure that we meet up face to face. And we have corporate membership with different organizations, and these help to, raise. We help to raise the profile of these organizations. We help, the BAs of the organizations that we're affiliated with develop great connections in the community, and we support BAs to develop their skills, knowledge, and to an extent their experience. Our sponsors, partners, and allies for conferences, you have IRM UK and you have BA Life. For education providers, this is for if you're looking to sit for any of our certifications and you're preparing for you want to prepare for the exams. We have education providers that we're associated with, Adaptive US and Watermark Learning. And we also have, if you are a member of the IRBA, that different benefits that accrue to you. On our site, we have a digital library of over 11,000 titles. We have competency assessment and development tools. We have the Babel Guide, of course, which is available for free. We have IIB for free once you become a member, sorry. We have IIB's Knowledge Hub. We have IIB webinar archives where you can go to look for, archives that have been done in the past. So there's a rich base of knowledge on there. We help offer discounts for, certification exam fees, conference tickets, and many more. And we have a rich community and network. We have a global network of 120 chapters across 40 countries. We have volunteer opportunities to contribute with content or participate in speaking engagements. We have a career center and job board. We have a digital member and certification members. These and many more benefits that accrue if you become a member of the IIBA. And so I would encourage you to, as much as possible, become a member. Over to you, Christina.
Right, thanks, Zabina. And we're delighted to be joined by Karthik Ravichandran, Senior Business Analyst at CMC Partnership. And he'll be sharing his dynamic approach to managing project complexities around stakeholder engagement. So yeah, thank you for spending the evening with us, Karthik. And thank you to Abina, who's taken us through a walkthrough of our chapter, who's our careers lead. We'll get started. If there's any questions, we'll address them towards the end. If not, we'll close. But yes, now to the main event. Thank you, and over to you, Karthik.
Thanks, Christina, and Abina, and thanks for everyone else who will be watching this recording on hopefully a much cooler day. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you about, as Christina pointed out, about how you can resolve difficulties with stakeholders, especially when you're working on complex projects. And the main thing you can have as a business analyst in this sense is having that perseverance. And sometimes when you're in these complex projects with multiple stakeholders, it may feel like, and the way I've experienced this is playing like a game of snakes and ladders. And that's what this talk is going to be about. How that snakes and ladders board game can be related to the work we do as business analysts in those difficult environments, and why having perseverance is important. So imagine this: you spent weeks crafting what you believe is a solid, insightful analysis. And you walk into this room where you have all the stakeholders that you need to engage with, and you need to share your findings with them. But instead of getting those nods of agreement and engagement that you expect, all you get at the end is silence. And worst of all, the discussion may veer into a completely different way to the one you anticipated. And you're left thinking, wait, what just happened? The support that you were counting on at that meeting kind of slips away. And I've been there. And it feels like you've just fell down a trap door in kind of the middle of a game that you were thought you were winning because you were feeling you made that progress. As we all know, the large complex projects involve lot of multiple stakeholders and personalities, and can make securing that endorsement a challenge. And there are many reasons, but I've listed some here, especially around stakeholder engagement and why it can be challenging. It could be around stakeholders are busy, so there's competing priorities. So often they have limited time and focus on the work that you're doing. So there may be gaps in understanding. So this is quite important, as not everybody involved in the project has the same context or the technical depth that you may have or another stakeholder might have, which can lead to misalignment in understanding. And there could be conflicting agendas, different goals that cross across the different stakeholders or individuals as well that make up that project, which can pull the work you're doing in different directions. And there are also situations where there's delays and also escalations as well, and where sometimes things like this are out of your control. So this is why I wanted to share my own experience of navigating this type of journey, and again why it's like playing a game of snakes and ladders. Because sometimes when things don't go planned, it's about having that perseverance in that face of those setbacks. So now let's go and build that game board. So what I'll do now is walk you through what everybody should know what a snakes and ladder board game should look like. So it's here you can see a grid that's been numbered to 100. You have a start and you have your finish. And here are your ladders. Here's a dice. Here's your snakes. So as I said, this is a typical snakes and ladders board game that everybody should be aware of. Now, what will be different in the context of a project, especially of those complex projects, is that those ladders are like your stakeholder in endorsement, generally speaking, and your snakes are kind of the resistance that you're facing, and where there's that setback, and that's what makes you slide down. The dice it represents the action you take, a kind of meeting we schedule with the stakeholders, the workshop that we facilitate, or it can be the different artifacts that we produce to move the project forward. And in this version of the game, there's only two players, you as the business analyst, and then you have the stakeholder. But unlike the traditional board game, it's not about who finishes first, and also you don't start at that starting place, grid number one. But in this instance, the BA will probably start in a much more high position than compared to the stakeholder. One way you can think about the grid is also a level of understanding. So the BA, because they've probably been working on this particular project much longer and having the different conversations, will have a better understanding of it. So that's why they're higher up. But when it comes down to a stakeholder, they will probably have a less of an understanding, but they'll be, and that's why they're towards the bottom of the game board. But ultimately, it's about taking that stakeholder and as a BA to the finish line. And it's not about who finishes first. It's about finishing together. And for simplicity, I just have the one game counter for the stakeholders. But again, in the real world, you'll probably have multiple stakeholders, and it's about how can you join all those stakeholders to bring it all, align them together, and get all of them together to that finish line. And another difference to a real Snakes and Ladders board game is that in this instance, the only the BA will roll the dice. And another thing I want to go into and give a bit more around why, again, this Snakes and Ladders board game is still different to the board game that everybody knows, is that this board game is also dynamic. And what I mean by here is the Snakes and Ladders that we see here is they move with time. So, you go across hours and days and weeks, months or years. And as a good example, from June 25 to July 26, things can change. So you could have more snakes or less snakes, and the positions they're in will fluctuate, and depending on, so you can't, it's just how a project plays out, right? The main thing is to think about that these snakes and ladders aren't fixed in one position, that they shift with time. And also the snakes and ladders change in size too. They can get longer or shorter. And sometimes what might happen is you might approach a ladder and you think, okay, we're going to get this progress, we're going to move up this ladder, but it could change to a snake. And that's kind of the reality of managing stakeholders. It isn't actually linear. And I think the main message here is it's not as simple as you think it can be. And in going to the dice. Now, as I said, the dice is about creating the right artifacts, or having that meeting with the right stakeholders, or doing something, or like an action orientated only being active and doing something so you can move forward and building that momentum. And it's about using the right tools, right? But also you need to remember that you can play the dice that we can play the dice with a loaded dice as well. And the best way to remember this is around like having a coffee with the right stakeholder. But another thing I want to point out here is this can also be a double-edged sword, in the sense that you might have a great meeting, for example, a great successful requirements gathering workshop, which from that initial thought, you might think, oh, actually, this workshop has been really, really successful, and you might feel like, okay, you made real progress, and you might feel, okay, yeah, there's that sense of momentum. Yes, we're moving up the board. There's that momentum. But in reality, sometimes what could happen in those requirements gathering workshops, for example, is that a new information or emerging requirements can come up, which might send you back to the drawing board. And this is where I said that dice could be a double-edged sword, in a sense where sometimes you might feel you're making progress, but you actually going back, sliding down the snake in essence. But again, it's all about part of that process and having that perseverance of coming through this. So let's go back to the Snakes and Ladders board game, and please keep an eye on the ladder on this ladder here. So this ladder has changed now from where it was here into a snake. And this is where I want to provide some context about my experience around my engagement with stakeholders in a kind of a complex project that I worked on, and the reason why that experience led me to kind of come up with this Snakes and Ladders board game metaphor, and hopefully that message comes out and you can understand why I felt that way. So the project I started on had several delays before I even joined. So and we kind of had tight deadlines to meet as well, and so everybody was stretched. So when I joined, I kind of had those kind of initial meetings and felt encouraged. Okay, all right, okay, things are moving in the right direction, and we kind of agreed on certain artifacts that were put together, and shared those artifacts with the stakeholders to kind of build that clarity and align with them. Yeah, so this is where it's around about the rolling the dice. But now the problem is now, as you've seen, that the ladder's now changed to a snake. And the reason is I faced a lot of silence with that stakeholder, even though I thought that I had done the right stuff, create the right artifacts, set up the right meeting, invited the right people, and yet had that setback of silence, and it felt like that slide down. And again, this didn't just happen once, and it happened again. And I just thought, oh, okay, can things get any worse or more challenging? I kind of hit another slide down, but this time it came from a limited access to a crucial group of stakeholders. So I needed access to those individuals who were third-party suppliers of a middle office system, and they were key to getting them involved, gather requirements, and overall needed them for the project success. But the problem was we faced that the relationship with that third party supplier was owned by a particular stakeholder, and they were not giving us the access that we needed. So hence why the limited access. But even though this raising to the stakeholder to involve those supplier and us sooner rather than later, our concern wasn't fully acknowledged. When situations arise like this, it's not intentional. Yeah, but again, ultimately, what it did for me and the team that I worked with is just create another barrier, and the kind of that progress slowed, and the team and I kind of found ourselves facing with yet another delay, and again just more sliding down. And I just want to pause here, because what I've done so far is introduce the Snakes and Ladders board game and the metaphor of it, and the reason why I thought about it based on the work I did, and it kind of explained some of the problems I was facing, and where and why I felt like I was sliding down a snake, and that which was mostly around the kind of the stakeholder engagement, where they were either I was provided limited access to a third party supplier that I needed access to, or they were just ignoring, and they kind of put a silence, like a wall in front of me, which then I had to overcome. And then this is just all around, right? I did feel that there was momentum, but there wasn't any upward progression. And it was really around, as I said, it was really around, like, if I was playing snakes and ladders, or just snakes. And the reason I say that is, well, I'm not having the momentums that I need, and it just feels like just sliding down. And so I paused myself, and I thought, okay, what's actually making this so difficult? We're all here in this project, we're all here there to achieve the goal, but what's making it difficult? And the way I thought about it is, it's about meeting the stakeholder where they are. Now, if you remember, when I first introduced the Snakes and Ladder board game, the business analyst was much higher up, and then where the stakeholder was, and that was done by purpose, as I explained, that the business analyst has a much more understanding of that project. You might be only working on this one project, right? And this is this is your deliverable, while the stakeholder, where they might be having their full-time job, and your project that you're working on is just, they're impacted by it in a sense, but it's not their full-time job. So it's about, and it's trying to make things easier for them. And then that's why I created this slide in about meeting that stakeholder where they are. And it's about also about having that shared success. And it's about this time rolling the dice and being action oriented. It's about having that intention. It's about setting up the right conversations, engaging through the emails, walking through the analysis again, and having that perseverance of repeating the things you've probably done before, but this time having the intention of, okay, the things I've done before, even though I felt like it created momentum, but it just didn't work. Okay, why? And okay, it's just about meeting the stakeholders where they are and understanding from their perspective, see if you can be in a position where you can understand where the stakeholders are coming from, and I wouldn't say necessarily change, but take some factors in, and trying to meet the stakeholders where they are. And maybe they need, for example, they just need to see a more in end-to-end understanding of the project or a process, a map or something you're creating. Because what's sometimes easy to forget is, as I said, as a business, in this aspect, as a business analyst, sometimes because we're a lot involved in the project every day, and we know the finer details, it's sometimes we kind of miss out passing those details into the stakeholders themselves, because as I said, the stakeholders, they have their full-time jobs, so they're probably not 100% aware of what's going on, and maybe you just have to repeat certain things again, and just doing that with intention, and again, it's just all about making the stakeholders comfortable, and about meeting where they are in terms of the understanding. And once you meet them there, and I think it's all about just how do you get to the finish line, to the success point together. And the way I move forward in this is that and the reason and how I want to do this is that I want to reflect on three things that I did that helped me change this, the snakes and ladders game around is and the kind of three things I'm going to talk about is around reducing the number of snakes, adding new ladders, and if we do have those snakes, it's about how can we reduce them, to reduce the size of them, so you're not sliding down further down the board, or if you go up on a ladder, see if you can elongate the ladder, so you go further up the board than before. And of all of these three things is all about just moving up the board. And the three things I want to cover here is one, retrospective analysis, number two, empathy, and number three is strategic elevation. So now, what is retrospective analysis? Well, I think retrospective analysis it's just a fancy way of saying, for me, and the way I've done this is journaling. And what I mean by journaling, it isn't about documenting what's like what has happened and like kind of creating an action list, but it's more about writing out how probably the stakeholder reacted or how my team reacted and the kind of the dynamics around that meeting, especially like around you might have shared a presentation or walked the client through some piece of data analysis, or you might send out an email, whatever you need to do. But it's just about documenting those kind of things, and then while you're journaling, think about how they reacted and could you have done things differently, and it's just and thinking about the whole game board as well as you journal, you know. And one good thing that I found with this journaling and reflecting on maybe you might journal daily or you could do a journal weekly, but just reflecting on it, as I said, you can sense where the where the progress is going to happen, or if you can anticipate, okay, the way they reacted to certain things that you talked about. It's just documenting them, so you've got record. So as you move on these projects, you try to maybe adapt yourself, or bring or just understand the kind of the behavior of that stakeholders. And on a flip side of doing this journaling, one thing that helped me is, especially if you have to do monthly reports, is doing these journals, I think, does help with the monthly reports, because you're not going back through notes or anything to write your monthly reports, because all of this has been documented somewhere. You can easily, depending on your template, copy and paste of your key achievements and your key risks, because all of that will be, you document them in this journaling that you do. Yeah, and that retrospective analysis kind of just is all about clearing the fog. It's all about understanding what is in my control and what wasn't. And what I mean by the fog is around that snakes and ladders board game, to see more of it rather than just maybe you can just probably see the 10 to 20 squares ahead of you. And the second point here is empathy. Now, empathy, I think, isn't just about empathizing too much with the stakeholder, and that's not what I mean here. But it's more around about building trust and linking it to the snakes and ladders board game. It's all about, okay, you might face that, might hit a snake, but it's about, as I said, reducing the size of the snake, so you don't go further down the board, as if it was a longer snake, right? And then again about the ladder, it's about making the ladder much longer. And also when it comes down to changing a snake to a ladder, having that empathy um, is really helpful, because sometimes with these stakeholders, it isn't personal, but it's just part sometimes the work they do, and it's about understanding, okay, what is their motivation, what's going in the world, and understanding what's changed. Because sometimes you can have a really good conversation with a stakeholder, and the next time you have that conversation with the same stakeholder, the vibe or the atmosphere in that meeting room or online could be very different. But and the third thing is strategic elevation. And with this, it's important to remember that, a strategic elevation where you need to escalate, it doesn't have to be the last resort. And if you do it with the right stakeholder, it can create a new ladders. So what I mean by those new ladders, they could be new opportunities or new pathways that they can open for you. So hence why they're the ladders in this board game, and you and the stakeholder that you're working with can go up the board. And for me, from my experience, I had a really good project manager and I had a really good program managers where I could escalate certain aspects. And they were able to either provide guidance or just to create those new ladders for me. And sometimes what speaking to the right stakeholder can do is they can bring in a new stakeholder as well. So, again, it's about escalating it to the right stakeholder, and based on, your relationship with them and how they understand the work is going, they can bring in new stakeholders. And hence why there's the orange stakeholders, I've changed to a green one, just to say that, speaking to the right stakeholders, they can bring in new stakeholders to the work you're doing, just to help you unblock pathways for you. So now bringing all this together, as I said, is all about that shared success. And for me, going through that journey where as I played out kind of the struggles I had, where I was where it felt like a lot more sliding down, but going through those processes, those three techniques, where it was journaling, the empathy, and strategic elevation, it really helped me to get where I needed to get to with the project I was working on at the time. But also another important thing around those three things is having that perseverance. And why I say perseverance is important, because you are going to go down ups and downs. And what this board game in this instance, it's not about luck. It's about the action that we take and how we engage and adapt and obviously persevere. And it's not about finishing first, it's about finishing together. And it's about bringing the stakeholders to that final square. And again, perseverance matters here, especially, as I said, when you're going through those tough moments, when you slide back. But it's about having that chance to reset and building new ladders and keep moving forward. But it's not only about moving forward. It's about taking that stakeholder or stakeholders in that journey with you, so you all can get to that finish line together. Yeah, I've said this many times now. I guess the thing about this key message here, and what I would like everybody that's watched this recording to take away is this, stakeholder engagement isn't really straightforward. There's a lot of challenges, like the Snakes and Ladder board game that we went through. But like I said, it isn't just based on luck, but there's things that as an individual that we can do, especially when we feel that we feel like we feel like we're sliding down a snake, or getting stuck in a loop where you go up a ladder, slide down a snake, go up a ladder, slide down a snake. We all face them. But if you just think about a power that you have, and that power is perseverance. And as I said, perseverance isn't just about as a pushing forward. It's also about guiding others towards that shared goal. And yeah. So in this game, and as I said, the key message I want everybody to take from my talk here from today is about having that perseverance when we're facing the difficulties, and making sure that we all get there to our whatever our objectives are together. And that's why perseverance truly matters, and I believe to be important. Right, thank you. And if you do have any questions from this presentation, you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn, and there's my work email address as well. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah.